Have a pleasant day to all of you, especially to our beloved instructor, Mr. Jomader Omungkot.
Good morning everyone, I'm Angeline Banatanto. Today, together with my group mates, we will discuss about challenges of egoism. So according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, egoism is a doctrine that individual self-interest is the actual motive of all conscious action. Egoism asserts that every conscious action is driven by one's own self-interest, positing that personal gain or satisfaction is the underlying motive behind all human behaviors, regardless of appearances or altruistic gestures. This doctrine suggests that individuals inherently prioritize their own well-being above all else, shaping their decisions and actions based on the pursuit of personal benefit. Ethics is simply just a matter of whether they enjoy pleasures or gain their self-interest. This theory is attractive to some individuals because of the simplicity they show by reducing concepts of right and wrong actions, mere pleasures, or self-interest. However, it violates key ethical principles. One iteration of this theory dismisses the necessity of rational reasoning as a basis for ethical judgment. By solely focusing on personal feelings or sentiments like pleasure, it disregards the need for logical and reasoned analysis in ethical deliberation, which is a fundamental aspect of ethical evaluation. So I'll provide an example para mas maintindihan ninyo what I'm trying to say. Imagine a scenario where the company, driven by the desire to maximize profits, chooses to dump industrial waste in an economically disadvantaged area. Despite being fully aware of the severe environmental harm this action will cause to the local ecosystem and community, the company prioritizes financial gain over ethical considerations. So this decision, rooted in self-interest and the pursuit of profit, neglects the ethical principle of environmental responsibility and the well-being of the affected community. Another version of this simplified ethical perspective fails to meet ethical standards by lacking impartiality. So impartiality in ethics refers to the idea of being fair and unbiased, considering all relevant factors without favoritism or discrimination. When an ethical perspective lacks impartiality, it means it might be influenced by biases, preferences, or considerations that aren't universally applicable by fair to all involved parties. For example, so the teacher is favoring her nephew over another student who deserves a higher grade based on their performance. The biased grading doesn't align with the student's actual achievements, but rather with the teacher's personal relationship. So this action demonstrates a lack of fairness and impartiality in assessing students' work. The teacher's subjective preference for her nephew influences her judgment, leading to an unfair advantage for one student over another. This behavior disregards the principle of treating all students equally and assessing their work based on its merit rather than personal relationships or biases. Both are recognized as a non-ethical standards. So the following lessons presented by my group mates, we're going to understand comprehensively the way and the reason this framework cannot be employed as a measure for validating whether a certain action or decision is ethically right or wrong.
So hello everyone, I am Joser Oman Ligoy and I will be discussing the motivation or the driving force and challenges of egoism. To give you a short recap, being already discussed by our first reporter of this lesson, so what is egoism? So when we say egoism, it is an ethical theory, and its maxim is the highest good of each person is his or her own happiness. No. So when we say pagmingundag its maxim, it meant as an ultimate truth or a general truth, or what egoists tend to adhere. No, it's a principle that they tend to stick on. So in my lesson, I will be discussing and providing examples of how we could assess ourselves in terms of our driving forces and the intent behind egoistic people who tend to only do good on their self-interest. So when we say or can describe motivation in general, is the desire or willingness of someone to do something, no? But in terms of egoism, unsa gid ay ang intent nato behind why mohimo ta good? Is it for our own benefit or for the greater good of someone's welfare? So like there, I have put up some 2 bullets. This is a concept that gives us an idea what is egoism, what is its principles, no? So dire makita na to like dire, sa driving force, number 1. What is our intention before we act in doing good? No? Are we able to do good out of selflessness, or is there something behind that intent that makes us want to do good? And then here also is the intent behind egoistic people. So more what really are there sa ilang intention behind why mohimo silag something for the greater benefit for their own ba or to the society. Now to give you an example, for an instance, a middle-aged man who happened to meet along his way an old lady experiencing difficulty crossing the street. He went up to her and offered his hands to assist. Yet while crossing and without her ever noticing, he slowly pickpocketed her all the way. So let's assume that the people at that time happened to not notice. Wala naka-notice ang let's just assume this. The middle-aged man was already pickpocketed her. Hence, the people were in general thought that the guy was just simply lending his help ato na lady, However, anong present moment ang naitabo na gigawatan na dahi siya sa tigulang. Even without or with doing something that is bad, regardless if being caught or not, still suspicions still remain of what is the real intention of helping. So, again, why is it that we want to help others, and why is it that we do it? Ngano man kailangan ka mutabang ka sa uban, and ngano man nga ato nang gihimo. So this leaves us a question of why, Another, for an instance, like sa karon kanang mga mainstream nga videos sa internet, like kanang mga social experiments where foreigners pretend to be homeless and try to pretend to be poor and begging for money atong mga tawo na sakto lang ang kwarta, and then afterwards, if those people tend to lend money to the foreigner, he give them back triple or even more of their money. So we can assess this in 2 parts. So what was really the foreigner or YouTuber's intention or motivation in pretending to be homeless and giving away his money, while also being recorded and then being uploaded later on YouTube and gaining numerous views? Was the foreigner being genuine just cause was the foreigner being genuine ba? Kaya nagpretend siya, and then afterwards if muhatag ka mo give out ra po ka sa mo yara pong ibalik ang money, or was there an intent behind that in making money tripling up his money because YouTube pays mo pay ang YouTube og dako nga money. Yeah. So number 2, was his intent for the goodness of those people who only had enough money to suffice their lives on a daily basis was driven purely of genuineness, or was there an intent of using them as a content only for the foreigner to become more mainstream and rich, since unsa iyaha gihatag kay gamay ra jud sa iyaha madawat sa YouTube views. So this question helps us evaluate if the foreigner's intent was purely good or there was something behind ganong iyaha to gihimo. And later on my other groupmates will discuss the lesson proper or the content in egoism. Now, makita na to rin as the old age says, or this is a saying, give a hungry person a fish and he eats for a day. Teach him how to fish and he eats for the rest of his life. So I think for me this meant as what about one's self-interest, no? So, for me, selfishly speaking, when you help others in learning something like fishing, you are not just doing it for them, you are actually also doing it for yourself by contributing to a community where everyone, like fishermen, tend to thrive. And lastly, to leave you a question about I wanna leave you guys a question, no? So dali makita ninyo, can we really do anything without promoting our own interests? And I think my discussion will end here, and then later my reporters will discuss the egoism, like challenges of egoisms and other things.
Are you ready to play, guys? Let's guess the word in this picture. Let's go! Now, in this video, let me discuss my part, the psychological egoism. But before that, let us first discuss all about altruism. So, altruism means unselfish regard for or devotion to the welfare of others, or charitable acts motivated purely by altruism. Simply put, it is being unselfish or selfless, and either nonetheless in some situation, especially when we examine the motive or intention behind seemingly altruistic act, we find out that it is not entirely selfless at all. So, altruism is also called as the unselfish behavior, which is actually connected with some benefit for the person who does it. So, ang tao na gumawa nun, or yung tao na gustong gawin yun, ay meron siyang gustong makamit or makuha. Kasi alam niya na kapag ginawa niya yon, merong benefit or merong pakinabang yun sa sarili niya. Such as the desire to have a more significant life, public recognition, personal satisfaction, of course, and the hope of heavenly reward. So, mas meron siyang kaya-ayang buhay, meron siyang public recognition o yung public acknowledgement, meron siyang personal satisfaction, yung magiging happy siya sa sarili niya, ganun, and the hope of heavenly reward. So, kung halimbawa, aakyat na siya ng langit, meron siyang reward. So, yun. So, for this reason, Rachel's of 2015 ay nakapag-banggit or nabanggit niya ang tungkol sa psychological egoism at ang ethical egoism as mindsets that definitely counter-argue with the notion of altruism. So let's discuss the psychological egoism. Now, in this video, let me discuss my part, the psychological egoism. So, psychological egoism affirms that every action we do is always motivated by the want or desire to do it, or that we want to do something because it makes us feel good. So in short, psychological egoism is we do act on our own self-interest. So let me tell you about what does our manual book mean. So, psychological egoism is the belief that all human actions are ultimately motivated by self-interest. So according to Thomas Hobbes, when we examine various motives, we can eliminate those that appear altruistic and find that we are actually driven by self-centered desires. And for instance, acts of charity are seen as a means to discipline, power, and superiority over the less fortunate. So similarly, feelings of pity towards others are rooted in our own aversion to experiencing pain and suffering. So, in essence, our actions and emotions are centered around ourselves with a focus on protecting our own well-being and asserting our dominance. This perspective suggests that human nature is inherently self-centered, with individuals constantly preoccupied with their own interests and desires. It draws parallels to the character Gollum from The Lord of the Ring, who obsesses over the ring and refers to it possessively as my precious. Psychological egoism challenges the notions of genuine altruism, suggesting that even seemingly selfless acts are ultimately driven by self-interest. It also argues that all our actions came up by our own interest or by self-interests. One argument claims that altruism is based or is false because we always act based on our wants and desires. Similarly, another argument suggests that we do things because they make us feel good. However, we do things we do not want to do but feel obligated to ought to do. And for example, studying for an exam instead of going to a party. While psychological egoism has some validity, so it cannot be true all the time, that as it commits the logical fallacy of sweeping generalization. It fails to account for actions done out of necessity or duty, undermining its claim or universal self-interest. So, in this textbook, let's read here about the two arguments. So, psychological egoism relies on two arguments. The first states that altruism is false because every action we do is always motivated by the want or desire to do it. With the same conclusion, the other affirms that we want to do something because it makes us feel good. So people's willingness to help others, even at the cost of their own lives, disproves psychological egoism. Selfless acts, like sacrificing oneself to save others, cannot be explained by self-serving motives or personal satisfaction alone. Accepting psychological egoism as more true is futile because feeling good after helping others doesn't necessarily indicate selfishness. So, a genuine concern for others can coexist with the positive feelings that the result from selfless actions. So let us take this as an example here in this textbook that we can remember about these are sacrifices that parents make for the sake of their children. So there are lots of sacrifices in which our parents done for us, to us. A mother certainly has genuine concern for her children or for her child in acts of sacrifice by willingly give up and risk many things of herself. The mark of this authenticity lies on the fact that the stake is high or the risk of losing a lot remains a possibility, but she still does it anyway. So, however, witnessing a successful outcome of her sacrifices, it is of course natural and understandable for her to enjoy some good feelings such as the joy of seeing her child graduating from college. So, it is a happiness to our parents, rather, that they saw us succeeding. They saw us successfully reaching our goals. So let's move forward to the deepest errors of the psychological egoism. The deepest errors of psychological egoism lie in its controlling assumptions and tendency to make sweeping generalization without considering exceptions. Intelligent individuals may be attracted to it due to its theoretical simplicity and rejection of human pretensions. However, reasonable thinking and critical discernment can help overcome this confusion. So, distinguishing selfishness or the pleasure seeking from self-interest or the well-being promotion can resolve the misconception. So, let's take the example here from this textbook. An illustration of a selfish act is when a person takes a prohibited drug for the pleasure of getting the approval of his or her friends, despite the fact that his or her physical and mental health are at risk, including the hurt that is caused to people around him or her. He or she still continues to do this with no regard of his or her life being destroyed. On the other hand, a self-interested act is refusing drug abuse at the expense of losing his or her friends, or for the sake of the well-being both of oneself and others around, especially his or her loved ones. So it states that if you intake the prohibited drugs, it may affect your entire life. Not only your physical health or your mental health, but your entire life. Also, this includes your loved ones, such as parents, brothers, sisters, relatives, titas, titos, etc. And with that, you are not thinking about what you will lose or what you're gonna lose for the sake of your friend. So since we are done in thinking critically about what is the psychological egoism and its errors, we can assert clarifications by: first, it is false that all actions are done from self-interest, by which it is clearly stated that not all actions are driven by self-interest. People engage in behaviors motivated by empathy, compassion, and a sense of duty. Selfishness is a fundamental aspect of human nature, contradicting the notion that all actions are self-interested. The second one is: it is false that all actions are done from self-interest, wherein it clearly modifies that not every action is motivated by self-interest. People often act out of empathy, compassion, or a sense of duty towards others. This contradicts the belief that all actions are solely driven by a personal gain or benefit. And the last one, it is false that concern for one's own welfare is always incompatible with genuine concern for others. For instance, love others as you love yourself, in which it explains that contrary to the belief that self-interest and concern for others are mutually exclusive, the principle of love others as you love yourself demonstrates that genuine care for others can coexist with caring for oneself. So it emphasizes the compatibility of self-welfare and concern for others. In short, psychological egoism means we do act in our own self-interest. Ito rin ay nangangahulugang ang lahat ng ating mga kilos ay pinangungunahan ng sariling interes. Ito ay nagsasabing ang ating mga gawa ay laging batay sa ating mga kagustuhan at pagnanais. Halimbawa na lamang rito ay sinasabi nito na ang pagiging altruistic o pag-aalay ng sarili para sa iba ay hindi totoo, sapagkat ang lahat ng ating mga kilos ay nagmumula lahat or lamang sa hangarin na mapakinabangan natin ito. Gayunpaman, hindi ito lubusang tama sapagkat may mga pagkakataon na ginagawa natin ang mga bagay na hindi natin gustong gawin. Ngunit, kailangan o nararapat na gawin ito. Ito rin ay nagpapakita na hindi lahat ng kilos ay batay lamang sa sariling interes. At may mga pagkakataon na tunay na iniisip natin ang kapakanan ng iba. Sa kabilang dako, ang pinakamalalim na kamalian sa psychological egoism ay ang pag-aakalang lahat ng ating mga kilos ay palaging batay sa sariling interes. Hindi ito ganap na tama sapagkat may mga pagkakataon na ginagawa natin ang mga bagay na hindi lamang para sa ating sarili, kundi para na rin sa kapakanan ng ibang tao. Ito ay nagpapakita na hindi lahat ng kilos ay batay lamang sa sariling interes. So, once again, have a great day everyone, and I have here, for the short recap, the psychological egoism states that we do act in our own self-interest, in which that statement is not clearly na nagpapatunayan talaga na yan ay tunay o totoo, sapagkat may mga kamalian or may mga misconception na nailathala batay sa aking pagsasalaysay sa inyo kung ano ang mga kamalian or mga misinterpretation or the deepest errors ng psychological egoism.
Good day everyone, I am Florcine D. Verzano, and I'll give a short recap and conclusion of the lesson 10, which is the challenge of egoism. So let's recall egoism. It is the ethical theory that individuals should prioritize their own self-interest and personal happiness over the interest of others. So clearly, egoism holds that people seek to pursue their own self-interest, or every actions are motivated by self-interest. And let's recall also the altruism. It is unselfish regard for or devotion to the welfare of others, or charitable acts motivated purely by altruism. So altruism is opposite to egoism. It holds that people can act to benefit others rather than simply pursuing their own self-interest. So what is their difference? So egoism and altruism, both of them are two views of human motivation. Egoism, acting out of self-interest. People act respectfully or kindly for their own advantage and giving to another person to ensure reciprocity, to gain self-esteem, to present oneself as powerful, competent, or caring, or to avoid censure from self and others for failing to live up to the society's expectation. So egoism involves helping with the expectation of help in return. So basically, all actions are motivated by self-interest. And then altruism, acting for the sake of others. One may be altruistic to recognize obligations to other people. One may be altruistic by making one's interest as important as one's own. So altruistic involves helping others with no expectation of help in return. So opposite to egoism. And actions are best interest for others rather than in one's own self-interest. So we have two types of egoism. First, the psychological egoism affirms that every action we do is always motivated by the want or desire to do it, or that we want to do something because it makes us feel good. So psychological egoism means that all behaviors are motivated by self-interest. In other words, it suggests that every action or behavior or decision of every person is always motivated by self-interest. And then second, we have ethical egoism. Revolves around the idea that each person ought or should pursue his or her own self-interest exclusively. Ethical egoism is a normative theory that the promotion of one's own good is in accordance with morality. In the strong version, it is held that it is always moral to promote one's own good, and it is never moral not to promote it. In conclusion, egoism as an ethical theory emphasizes self-interest as the primary motivating force for human actions. However, the challenge of egoism lies in its potential to disregard the well-being and interest of others. So extreme egoism, where individuals prioritize their own self-interest excessively, can lead to negative consequences such as strained relationships, lack of empathy, and social fragmentation. So the challenge of egoism extends beyond personal relationships and can impact larger societal structures. And excessive self-interest can undermine social cohesion, cooperation, and the collective pursuit of common goals. So while egoism may have certain benefits, such as promoting self-reliance and personal growth, its challenges arise when it neglects the moral responsibilities towards others and fails to consider the broader impact of actions. So overcoming the challenge of egoism involves critical reflection and consideration of alternative ethical perspectives, such as utilitarianism or deontological ethics, which advocate for a more balanced and approach that incorporates the interest of others. And that would be all. Thank you.
I hope na may natutunan kayong lahat sa video lecture na ito at sana'y maging gabay natin ito saan man dako tayo ng mundo magtungo. So, God bless everyone and thank you for listening and watching this video.